We've got Seth Margolis. Seth is Director of Education at the Museum of Flight, and he's also enlisted Rich Lynch, who's the camp manager who handles camp at Museum of Flight. So Seth brought a posse.
I also brought, sorry to interrupt, I brought Natalie Cullinan, who's our ACE coordinator as well. So we got
fantastic. So lots of good team. All right. And then finally, we've got Ella Paolucci.
Yes,
Sorry. From Pacific Science Center, and you run youth and family programs there. I've spent a lot of time at PacSci. Probably, I have an 8-year-old who spent so much time, he got sort of obsessed with the Science Center at 3 years old, and he wanted to go 4 times a week. And he tended to spend 4 to 6 hours at a trip there. So I probably spent more time at PacSci and not collected a paycheck. So favorite institution. So I kind of figured we'd keep this one a little bit informal. We've got all these super smart folks, so we'll just kind of move forward. So, but I figured before we can start talking about problems, we can just kind of figure out what do summer camps look like normally at PacSci?
Yeah, at PacSci, we are very lucky that we're able to work with so many amazing partners. So a typical summer for us looks like we're running 14 camps with 20 campers in each camp, just at the PacSci location. We've also got 8 other locations around the Puget Sound. So we run a total of 376, I believe was this summer's plan, individual camp sessions. And we serve up to about 6,000 campers each summer. So we're pretty large, and obviously this summer is not the best time to be serving lots and lots of people all at the same time. So we're definitely looking at what our summer could look like in terms of reduced partnerships, or in terms of reduced campers, or in terms of moving virtual, or any combination of the 3.
Right. So Seth and the gang, what does camp look like at the Museum of Flight normally?
It's a little bit like PacSci. We run a very large camp, full campus, 2,000 plus campers spread out over the whole museum campus, including the on-site high school. And it is, some sessions are done with partners. Most are done by the museum at the museum. We have used our north site, our Paynefield site. And we do everything from pre-K all the way up to high school, everything in between. The kids go flying and go scuba diving, and a wide range of various STEM related activities. But we really do utilize the museum site as well. And so for us, it is bringing a huge amount of campers and staff onto our property, while it's also the busy season at the museum, and orchestrating everything of that nature. So it's we like to call it a very elaborate game of chess, of moving everybody around at the right time to make sure people are in the right areas. And I think like PacSci, we're American Camp Association accredited, and I believe, no, not anymore. Okay, so with ACA accreditation, there's some pretty rigorous rules and regulations that need to be followed. So about chaperones and temperature that comes out of the bathroom sinks and food storage. So a lot of different requirements. So we start preparing for camp on the risk management side very early to make sure that we're hitting all these requirements that ACA has. So it's always going on when we're dealing with camp.
So Ashley, one of the great things about having you on here as well is you're working at a smaller institution, so camps might look a little different, or hosting campers might look a little different at White River?
Yeah, so we are a much smaller operation than Museum of Flight and PacSci. We operate camps at 2 different sites though. So we have our museum site where we operate 2 weeks of camp, and we have our Mary Olson farm where we operate 2 weeks of camp there as well. Our capacities for those are different. We have a lot more capacity out at the farm. So we typically about 28 kids per session there. Our camps though are part of the whole park system camps. So they have a program called Mix and Match Camp. So our camps can actually be selected with other parks camps. So for example, we offer museum camp from 9 to 12 in the morning. So campers can get dropped off over at a parks department building at like 6:30 in the morning, hang out there until our camp starts at 9. And then at noon, we send them back over and they do another camp in the afternoon over from like 1 to 4 p.m. with a lunch in between. Our whole operation is really dependent on what the parks is doing and what their capacity is going to be to support us in that. We switched to this model a few years ago. So we do have definitely the registration capability and everything to run camps on our own, but we do point toward our parks department for direction on how we're going to operate for camps this year. So that's 4 weeks total of summer camp. What we also depend on a lot over the summer for our other budget lines are other day camps coming to us to fill in part of their curriculum. So all those other fun day camps that won't be coming to us is a factor to consider too with our budget line there. So that's kind of a general overview, 2 different sites, 4 mostly just depending on what our parks department is doing.
Yeah, and I know at my institution, with the curator at Living Computers, we partner with Museum of Flight to provide some, what we have in the past, some computer science education stuff, and so Museum of Flight is transporting the kids over to our institution, and we handle them and then they spirit them away. So clearly, if you're trying to run summer camps, there's no small amount of logistical problems. It's weird because parents seem really touchy about getting like the right kid back, not just like a child. They're really fussy. So you mentioned actually revenue, and it seems like a good thing. How important are camps for the bottom line?
Really important for us. It's a pretty big factor for us in our budget, especially just in my education department budget. As you guys may or may not know, we are also kind of funded in a split. We have a historic society budget and we have a city budget. So some of our staff and some of our programs and all kinds of different things are funded from 2 separate budget lines. So a lot of our camp revenue comes in to support our historic society budget, which is being pretty greatly affected right now. So overall, our camps usually bring in anywhere between $600 to about $7,500. And when we're talking about an historic society budget, that's about maybe 150,000. Hillary, am I about right on that? About 150,000, including staff. That's a pretty big chunk when we start breaking it down. And then again, like I mentioned, all the revenue that we won't be getting from other day camps coming to visit us and paying a fee for that service as well. So it's a pretty big impact on us, and we're able to continue with it. We would definitely look at our funding structure as well as our capacity, because that will definitely be affected because we don't have the staff to support running as big of a program this year. Some of our staffing has been cut, and we also use intern hours to support our camps. So without that as well, we won't be able to serve as many kids, regardless of whether or not we could up the ratios from 1 to 10 or 1 to 8, whatever. Right.
So, but I imagine that's just in Auburn. I imagine up at PacSci and Museum of Flight, camps have no financial impact whatsoever, right?
No,
Okay.
they're not 3/4 of a department's revenue or anything of that nature,
Right.
or a way to drive membership in as well.
Yeah.
I'd say that 100% of our camp families are members, whether they come into it as members or because we have a discount
Mhm.
for members. It drives membership as well. So not just a huge revenue generator, but also a connector back to the museum.
Right.
And I imagine we all know it too, that it's the investment in the camper at the beginning, where you're getting the little one in and they continue with you through all the years. So it's not just the revenue for year one. You're getting some revenue in outer years too, as those campers return and return and return and return. But on the flip side, it is a huge. I just got a little note from Rich saying, "But we're nothing but a drain." No, it's to run big camps, you have to have a big staff as well, and so finding that nice line between the staff's expenses and the revenue is an ongoing challenge when running camps, of course. So, but it is.
It's interesting that you pointed out the link between camps and membership, because this is one of those things when you have members in terms of donor cultivation. This is kind of your escalator that moves on, where you actually get people become members, then supporters and donors, to hopefully higher level supporters and donors. But
staff, I'd say a big chunk of our camp staff are returning campers. I imagine it's very similar to everybody else as well.
Is that the case at PacSci, Ellie?
Sorry, the case about members or about paying our
about staff for camps, camp staff being former campers themselves?
Oh, interesting. We have a really robust internship program, and we see a lot of our interns actually become staff more so than I think we see campers becoming staff. And I think maybe a part of that reason is our camps end at 8th grade. And so we would lose a good chunk of people to other camps that have high school places, but we do have high school internship program that's kind of your program. There's a couple different levels you can be. And PacSci itself has a really awesome paid internship program through the Discovery Corps. So I think we see more folks who we hire on as staff from those two programs rather than our campers.
Right. But I imagine having mixed age group camps cohorts would allow you to, the younger ones would be able to see the cool things that the older ones are doing, and that would be a motivation to keep returning. But it seems the camps are not just about benefiting the bottom line. They also benefit, well, we hope that they also benefit the kid and also the families. I wonder if the group could speak to that, about how the role of camps, I guess, for our audiences that we're serving.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to what we're thinking about. We're kind of balancing the role of being a babysitter for our audience, and not in a degrading way. And especially our climate right now, people starting to go back to work or looking at starting to go back to work need childcare, and it's come out that childcare is an essential business. And we're looking at, does that apply to science museums, or I'm sure many other people are thinking, does that apply to their summer camps as well? So we're looking at being a kind of childcare role in the community, as well as I feel really fortunate to be in a nonprofit during this time, because I think I see a lot of us coming together and creating our own nonprofit community, versus a lot of for-profit companies are looking at how can they come out of this being more competitive. I feel really fortunate that we get to look at this and say, how can we come out of this more of a community than before? And I think that the communities that we serve are really going to benefit from the communities that we're creating as the nonprofit organizations. So I think it's kind of twofold there.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. We we primarily in past years have served a fairly low income area around Auburn. And a lot of our campers are summer long campers who, like you said, are kind of there as we're babysitters for them all summer long. And that's okay. Like, that's totally fine. We understand our role there. I also participated in a webinar with Metro Parks Tacoma and learned a little bit about what they're doing, because they actually are running small camps in schools right now to support, and they're working with Tacoma Public Schools. So I'm curious to see, as a city organization, if we will have any involvement with the school district that might affect us. But yeah, our community definitely are those campers who come back every year, like Seth was talking about. Interns who camped with us for 4 years straight and then said, can I come back when I turn 13 or 14 and help you guys out? So we would like to build that up through virtual engagement or through trying to figure out smaller programs that families might be able to participate in on site when things open up again. What kinds of things can we create that get people in our doors and build that membership, but also allow for them to have time and space in the museum? It's a little disheartening. I think I heard a little bit of that in Ellie's voice, because I think all of us look forward to camps every year. We didn't get in this business because we don't love hanging out with kids. So I think it is, on all of our minds, how can we, like you said, support our community and come out as even more inclusive and maybe reaching more audiences that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. I've seen a lot of engagement on our social media recently. We had a really nice big Giving Tuesday. So we're definitely seeing engagement from places that we haven't before. So we're trying to see how we can get that to translate into campers in the future if it's not this year. How can we keep these folks engaged and see them coming to us next year if we can't open our doors this year? I think that's like the biggest question for me personally right now is, how do I get kids and families engaged when I can't really offer them a great physical experience, but maybe something virtual? I don't know if that's something that you guys are wrestling with too. I'm sure that's all on our minds right now.
Mm-hmm. We're looking at a similar model we're thinking along the same ways as the Science Center. We are thinking, for our location being a South End service provider, there isn't a lot around us, but there are a lot of communities around us that are maybe not our traditional camp audience. So how do we bring in the new communities into the museum? Our neighbors, our friends, people who may not have ever thought about the museum camp. So we're looking at the possibility. I mean, we are a very large facility that can take in a lot of people. So really expanding out camp, but also looking at the idea of how do we loosen some of what we've done, so that it is less about trying to get kids inside airplanes to go flying, but giving them a really great experience, but in a childcare manner as well. So what does that mean to loosen up some of the rigor in both our programming and our processes? So it's something that we're experimenting and thinking about right now, making sure that everybody's included and engaged in the camp, but realizing where we are and what we can do for our neighbors. We've had some conversations with industry that's based in the South End, and can we take in the dependence of a large company to come and so while the parents are at work, all the kids are at the museum doing camp. So we're thinking about that idea of partnerships too, not just service providers, but also people who will be returning to work en masse.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I suppose that makes sense in sort of looking at the audiences you're serving a little differently, because you're typically, when you have the summer camps, it's not just about loads of kids wearing the same color t-shirts. It's also all of the summer visitors and crowds that we're getting in as well. So if you're not going to have those folks, there may be a way that you can accommodate more kids. Yeah. So this is the, how do you accommodate physical distancing what are the strategies? What do you do?
I have some things to share that are definitely not things that I came up with, but are some things that I have been hearing from other institutions, because we haven't put any of this in practice, but there are a few different ideas that I think are really solid. One of them is forming cohorts within your camp so that each child is in the same camp with the same other children and the same other camp leaders. So every day, each child is only exposed to the same adult and the same other children. So definitely those things. There's a couple of ideas about having a floater. So the floater would be the person who comes in behind spaces to clean them out. And that person is responsible for wearing PPE and following all of those guidelines. The other thing that I heard that was a really great idea was using radios, walkie-talkies to communicate when you're moving between spaces, again, to just reduce that contact. So I think that there are a lot of very simple ideas. The biggest challenge, I think, at a lot of these smaller institutions is the actual physical space to separate people. We're fortunate that we just had a really awesome new classroom built with our garage space. So at our museum, we do have 2 separate physical spaces. But as I said earlier, we also participate in the parks department. So what does drop off and pickup look like? And what does that screening process look like when we don't employ a health official or a nurse as a school system does? So right now, I think we're all unsure if those things will still be required when and if we can have summer camps, and how we're going to ensure that we follow those guidelines as kids are being dropped off. Are they getting screened? How are they getting screened? And who's doing that work? So those are big questions for us right now. And we're at this point, we're saying maybe we might have summer camps in August at our farm site would probably be the most likely thing that we do. And that's an easier gimme for us because we have a large outdoor space. We have a big barn. We can come up with things like using pool noodles or hula hoops to social distance, those types of activities. So I think that there are a lot of solutions. It's just, number one, manpower. Will we have staff to complete all of these obligations to ensure that people are safe? And then number two, will people feel safe in coming to our sites? How do we reach out and send that message positively without telling people a lot of things that they can't do? Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I'm talking a lot, so I'll stop now.
Yeah, I think, Ashley, that was a lot of really great insight. I saw someone asked in the chat, how can we address breaks for staff if they aren't able to float between cohorts? And what you were saying, Ashley, in this question is exactly what we're dealing with. I think the thing to keep in mind is that no one's going to have the perfect answer going into this. We're all going to be learning from this. And so the more that we can ask these questions and realize, okay, I might not have a perfect answer to start with, I think it's going to help us secure these ideas that we can move into something even not knowing exactly what it will look like. But I can say specifically to this question, we are looking at having meal break waivers for our staff. So telling our staff up front that they will be the adult with that group of kids throughout the day, and that their lunch breaks will be with the kids having their lunch breaks. And so knowing that ahead of time, I think can help prepare our staff for what's to come and kind of lessen the burnout that will happen if they didn't know ahead of time. But yeah, I think the other part of what I wanted to say was that we're looking at how difficult it is going to be to do social distancing. We're lucky that we have the entire Science Center, but in kind of prioritizing who gets to use the space at the Science Center, like I said, we have 14 camps that signed up, 20 kids a day. That's 280 campers off the top of my head. So that's impossible to do with the phases that we're going through. So we're looking at possibly having just our younger age groups on site and having those older kids in a virtual camp. So doing social distancing in that way, online and in person. I don't know, Seth, if you know anything about the museum's plan to do any virtual or anything like that.
We have been experimenting with a couple different models, thinking of one that would be a few days on, a few days on site, a few days online, and then balancing that between the older kids and the younger kids. Like all of us, the power of our camp is in my mind, the on-site experience. It's hard to replicate what we all do at home, right? We're very site-based and we have amazing things across the board. So how do we take advantage of what we have, but also making sure that we have the ability to do some rigorous cleaning in between it, or stagger some things. So we are looking at a possible model is staggered online and online and on site. But with that online component, one of the things that we have been thinking about is making sure that we give a kit to the participant to do when they're online. So it's basically weaving together the on-site and online components so that they're integrated together, but also understand that you can't do an eight-hour online camp. Nobody wants that. Maybe Chieko, because I see her shaking her head, she'd really want that. But it would be very, very tough. So figuring out that system as well, I think is up there. And how do you not dilute the product? I was going to, if that's okay, see if Rich or Natalie had any input about distancing.
Please.
This has been a big one for the American Camp Association across the board. And there has been some conversations as of late about reopening summer camps with the ACA mindset. Rich or Natalie, do you have any feelings for it from the ACA, the mothership approach, if you will? Or not?
I was just waiting to see if Natalie talked. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at a lot of different things. One of the things is our camps tend to be organized into classrooms of 30, but then subdivided within that usually to groups of between 5 and 10, and separating those smaller groups out. And one of the things Seth and I have been talking about is making full use of the museum and separating them out over the entire space of the museum so that they're not in close contact in rooms. We've also looked at just simply reducing class sizes so that we don't have, if we have to have them in a classroom, we don't have as many campers in the same space, and we're able to separate the tables by 5 or 6 feet. And we have, maybe one counselor and 2 or 3 campers at a table, and then they'll also are all separated. So those are some of the options we've been looking at. I did want to mention, because Seth had mentioned the online offline component, and then what we would do is we would offset those. So like Monday, Wednesday would be one group, and Tuesday, Thursday would be another. So we don't have an entire camp of, we don't have quite as many as Ellie does. We only have about 200 kids a week. But we don't have all 200 kids on site at the same time. And then, as much as possible, one of the things that the museum has been talking about is doing, and we've been talking about having shortened camps where we only have 4-day camps instead of 5-day camps, and the museum being closed Monday through Thursday, except for camp, so that it would basically just be camp throughout during our slow period. And then the museum would have, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which tends to be busier for the museum this time of year anyway, for the general public, and we're not intermingling them as much, because that's another concern as far as social distancing goes, is, as Seth said, a major component of our camp experience is to have our campers experience the museum. And that necessarily, under normal circumstances, means interacting with the general public in some form. And so finding ways to separate the general public from our campers has also been a real priority as well.
Absolutely. So if you did go with a model where, let's say Monday through Thursday, it's just for camps, and you just put Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the general public, would you play around with extending your hours a bit?
Yeah, extending hours or looking how private events would roll into it. A lot of different ideas. if you think about what the projections are for attendance for museums post-COVID, everything from 20% normal to 60% normal. And if we're talking about a 20% one, does it make sense for any of our operations to open on a Monday, which is a traditionally slow day anyways, and we're getting 20% of a slow day? And so if you can focus your crowd into a smaller window, it might make more sense. So it is something that is being batted around, but then on the flip side is extended hours mean extended staffing. And what do all these things mean? So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so clearly the logistical problems keep going on.
It's like pulling a string off a sweater, right? And it just keeps pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling. You never know what's gonna come from it.
Yeah, I'm so happy that everyone is just trying to figure out that just canceling camp is not the option. You're just looking at alternative solutions. So next time, if I were to do this panel again, I would definitely have the dark sider who would just be like, cancel it, we're quitting, shut it down. So I had questions about the virtual component. How might that work? Would that be developed? Because we traditionally in museums, science centers, cultural institutions, it's a live, in-person, tactile experience. And so many institutions may not have had as a robust of a virtual presence. How do you develop the curriculum? Are some things not going to translate? Are there really opportunities to allow kids to go a little deeper in ways that you wouldn't? How's that going to work? How might that work?
Yeah. Seth, I don't know if you or Ashley, if you've been able to do any virtual tests. We just had our first one on Friday, and that was our biggest question, Erin, was if we're able to be, our catchphrase is hands-on, interactive, engaging science. And that happens because we are in person, hands-on, interacting and engaging in science. And so the big question was, is that possible to happen on a virtual platform? And I think we learned a lot from that, but the resounding answer was yes. And some of the things we thought could lead into that were kids are not distracted by anything other than what's in front of them and learning from you. So they're actually very engaged in what they're doing. And if you can train your staff to be those big kind of, we call them interpretators. So they're doing the science, but they're big and they're entertaining and they can hold that focus. And the kids are very engaged in what they're doing, and they're engaged in you being interested in what they're doing. So we learned a lot of the little logistical things, but the overarching question of, is it engaging? We found the resounding answer was yes. The kids were very engaged. And I think almost more so than when we see them in a classroom and they're kind of like, oh yeah, well, okay, I'm done. They were really into it. So I don't know if either Ashley or Seth have been able to see that as well, or kind of what your take is on that.
We were fortunate. We have a digital learning department at the museum that has been running online programming for a number of years. Mm-hmm. And so we have an infrastructure, and we also used to do distance learning programs with other partners. So we had some infrastructure, and it was a quick shift on some programs. We started doing a number of our outreach programs already virtually. So there is that model, and we would always do that same kind of model that Ellie's talking about, that it would be a personal based one. It doesn't behoove us to have like a YouTube video. Here, kid, on Tuesday, you're at home, watch this YouTube video and tell me about it on Wednesday. No, it would be an in-person online lesson for the participant that's engaging and maybe not being able to do back and forth in real time, but using the chat box, making it as in-person as possible.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't tried anything that is just like a program for engagement. What we have been trying is to make some short lessons that are about our field trip subjects mostly, so that usually at this time of year, the main thing that our museum does is field trips. So probably like you guys too. And that's also a big budget line, as probably. So what we have been trying to do initially is provide something for teachers to use that they might be able to send to students that exposes them to the museum in short lessons. They're about 5 minutes long, and it's just one exhibit. One of our biggest problems right now is that we don't have very good Wi-Fi access at either of our sites. So it is very difficult to host calls in real time. Throughout our museum, we don't have any Wi-Fi access that is pretty secure. It's just a public, connection that drops pretty frequently, and doesn't handle lots of people on one call. The other site that we have, our farm, doesn't have Wi-Fi at all. So we are working with our city IT to see if we can have that capability out there so that we can engage people actually on site, because it is difficult to just kind of create a video and put it out there. It's hard to see who's engaging, how people are engaging. It's really difficult to measure those things if you really host a call in real time. So right now we're working to just get the infrastructure to be able to host things live. And once that happens, KCLS has reached out to try and maybe do some programs with us, some story times. We have a Farm Tots program that is really popular that I would like to try to kind of swing and see if we can do it virtually. I think that would be a really fun thing to do. But yeah, right now our whole parks department is working on a virtual recreation page. So we are participating in that. It just got launched over the weekend, so I don't really have very good metrics on who's engaging or how that's being engaged with. But hopefully over the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to flesh out what the best way to reach our usual audience is, and if they are willing to participate with us in the same ways as they have, or if we're going to have to figure out new audiences or new ways to engage. But right now, we're just working on technical problems.
Aaron, I was going to say one of the strategies we're also looking at is teaming up with partners who have the ability to go virtual on their content. We have a wonderful partner that deals with historic computers and programming, not going to name names, and we've already working with them, and perhaps there's a way that their component of our camps can go online, because it makes sense to be able to do that as well. So looking at partners who've got the capacity, the experience, and the content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Ashley had mentioned something about your usual audience and new audiences, and so I had two kind of final questions, and we'll open it up to everyone else. Is there one of the things that's in the possibility of kind of creating these virtual camp experiences? Can we target, is there a possibility to start thinking less in terms of seasonal business and looking at after school engagement? And also, who is going to be the first one that creates the summer camp experience for adults? Because I imagine that would be fun. I imagine there would be more than a few people, I'm not going to admit it myself, that would sign up for that. So whoever wants to take it.
Well, we're planning on, if the model is successful, to go virtual, to keep it going. Mm-hmm. We've seen a good engagement with our digital portal already as we moved to Museum of Flight at Home and Boeing Academy at Home. So there's all indication that we'd keep a digital capacity going, directed at new audiences. So younger audiences, after school programming, things of that nature. Right. I'd say that it's still in the developing stage, but all indications lead that way. And then for adult camp, I think what we want to do next is look at adult sleepovers, because that's what, before we go down that route, because I think that's a business model that I'm seeing a lot of smiles that, yeah, people would go on that one. maybe before our camp, we would go and sleepovers. And unfortunately, I need to jump off to another meeting because I have to go to a reopening meeting. So thank you all. If you do have questions, Rich and Natalie can speak on the museum's behalf. So thank you for including me in this as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, I think as far as continuing virtual engagement, one of my biggest projects right now is figuring out how we can continue our field trips and make sure that our field trips are available to teachers, whether or not that's through a digital platform or in person. I would like to, we have a really good partnership with the Auburn School District. We see every kindergartner, first grader, third grader, and eighth grader in the school district. So I really want to make sure that that is my biggest priority in continuing virtual engagement. Summer camps are really big for us, absolutely, but I feel like those would be easier for us to adapt to as part of the whole park system, because I'm not the only think tank on that. I've got other parks workers who are helping me problem solve and troubleshoot those kinds of things. But the field trip programs that we offer are just us. And I really want to make sure that those kids who aren't able to come this year, but hear all of the kids in subsequent years going on field trips and they didn't get a chance to come, I want them to be able to have the same opportunity and at least, get exposed a little bit to these sites that we have. So I'm working on creating some virtual field trip experiences that teachers can use at their own discretion, not something that's a live experience, but something that teachers could just use and show. So we definitely do after school programs. KCLS is one of our biggest partners with after school stuff right now. But we do like a story club with them. Their children's librarian is working with me to see about how we might be able to offer that in the fall. So right now, we're kind of just, like I said, continuing to follow direction from our Parks Department on our summer camps, but is it just ourselves working on how do we continue field trips? How are school budgets going to be affected next year for field trips in terms of after school programs and field trips? Are we still going to be able to offer these things? And if not, how can we be in the classroom, be on student, engaging with students, even if they can't come to our site physically in the fall and in the spring?
Right. I mean, it's depending on the quality of the instruction at schools, kids may have lost up to a half of a year of instruction. So administrators might be a little bit more reluctant to approve a field trip because they've got to catch the kids up. So Ellie, any plans for an adult camp experience?
Yeah, I had a boss, she left a few years ago, who always pushed for adult camp experiences. And I think for us, it was just a big eye roll because we deal with parents so often. And so thinking about bringing so many parents into one camp was very terrifying for us. But actually the Science Center as a whole has really taken to adult programming. We have a 21 plus membership now. We do a lot of adult events. So I think, it pains me to say, I think adult camps are coming up next. Yeah, I do. But we have gone into a lot of, more realistically, we have gone into a lot of family programming, which I think is the next first step, or the best first step, because you get to teach families how to engage in science, and if not science, engage in whatever your focus of your nonprofit is. So we teach them how to do things in our space and then give them the resources to go back home and do things on their own without us science experts doing something with them. So I think that's a good way to break into that adult realm.
Yeah, I mean, I was having a conversation with someone a couple of months ago, and we were talking about the importance of these engagements between museum staff and with families, and about how the opportunities of having museum staff and educators who are able to model different ways of behaving with a kid to pull something out. Like, parents pay attention to this. It's not just their kid doing something, they're actually watching the adult. So it's important work. So does anyone have any questions? we didn't cover?
I think Seattle Architecture Foundation. Did you have?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim. I apparently logged in with my Works account. That's where I work, Architecture Foundation. We are experimenting this weekend, first time, with moving one of our family programs virtually. And we've never done this before. And so, Ellie, you mentioned that you had experimented. I didn't know if you had any tips or advice that you can share with those of us who may be like starting to kind of wade into these waters.
Yeah, definitely. So we've done 2 that I've been a part of. We've done one, we called it our Family Science Night. We turned into a virtual program. And the one we did most recently was just a 3-hour camps test. I think that depending on who goes into it, I and one of my supervisors were hands-on and actively led the first one, and we were the presenters. And the second time we got to take a step back and really put trainings together to teach the next educators. So I would say your first round, learn as much as you can from it. Do as much as you can on your end to be prepared for it, but be ready first and foremost to learn from that. So that way your next one, you can put together all of those materials so that way you can pass that along to folks, or even if you're doing it, you can keep your knowledge in one place and make sure that you're keeping this program sustainable so you're not reinventing the wheel every time that you have to put this together. I'd say as much as you can build routine into what you plan on doing with this first one, editing that routine a little bit for the next one. We've kept ours at 2 hours. We had a science demo together. We used breakout rooms to split groups up into smaller spaces. We had 2 educators. One was the lead teaching the activity, and one was the lead running the background on the tech for all of that. And then we came back together and we finished up our science activity, had kind of a wrap up with our families, and said goodbye. So I think as much as you can build that routine in now, learn from it this first time, and then go into the second time really feeling like that is your first launch. Will help you feel more successful in it.
Thank you.
I have a question I'd like to pose. What are people's thoughts on ways of reaching our underserved communities? We have a lot of campers that come to us through open houses when they learn about our programs, students who might not have the access to technology or the internet. What are people's thoughts on that, or plans about trying to get those kids more involved in the programs?
So that's a really good question. We usually work a lot with underserved communities as well. And sometimes from far away from Auburn. Sometimes with like our overnight programs, usually we see a lot of kids from Federal Way, from Burien, from people who are definitely not showing up in our community and seeing a flyer at the library or something. So right now, what I am hoping to do is to work out, well, we usually have literature at the farmers market, which is like in the same campus as us. We're like the Lescove Community Park campus. So there's the library and our park, the senior center, and our museum all in one. And we also have our farmers market there. So I'm hoping to really get some good literature about how to engage with us digitally into our farmers market's hands, because that is a place where we see a lot of local families who are low income. Our farmers market accepts EBT. So we've got a good audience there that we can build off of. In the past, we've been a part of the Parks Department's summer concert series. We do a program called Hooked on History before that. And we also participate in big community festivals, which won't be happening this year. So in the past, that's usually how we engage with those audiences that don't find out about us through online resources or events calendars, things like that. But this year, our farmers market will be running. And that will be a really great avenue for us to get flyers and literature in people's hands who don't find us online. So that's my that's my best answer right now. I'm not sure how else we'll be trying to reach those audiences other than, you know, our regular being in the Parks brochure, being in the Auburn Magazine. So if there's something that your city puts out that you're able to get your name in, like the Auburn Magazine goes to every household in Auburn. So if there's something like that that you could get yourself into, that would be tops.
Thank you.
Natalie, your question reminds me that specifically about access in terms of internet access, there may be real opportunities for the institutions, the partnership development team to link up with internet service providers to provide some hotspots that would be distributed to the campers. You just have to figure out exactly about what, I mean, at PacSci, your numbers are 280 a week, so I don't know how many of those kids would need to have those kinds of services, but I'm sure this is seems to be a problem that could be solved. And it could be a problem that would absolutely, a CSR department would be thrilled to partner and extend camps to kids who may not have internet access.
I could be wrong, but I do have a vague recollection of seeing, did Amazon just donate like 1,000 computers or tablets to either a local nonprofit, or it might have been a Washington school district with low-income families. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right, Aaron. Those relationships are going to be invaluable. They're going to be very valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm just thinking about there's T-Mobile, there are Comcast, these are all the groups that you'd want to hit to kind of solve these problems. If anyone needs any, I might have 2 contacts there. If anyone wants to email me separately, I can probably provide an introduction. Is that so? Is that any other questions? I'm going to take the silence as no. So I want to just thank everyone for jumping in and participating. I know it's been very, very busy, and everyone's got a lot on their plates, and working from home and trying to exercise physical distancing and also self-care is very, very tricky. But I appreciate Ashley, Seth, Rich, Natalie, Ellie, for joining, and everyone else for calling in.
So yeah, I'll jump in and again thank people. I guess one of the things to put out there is if anyone has any objections to us sharing stuff that happened in the discussion today, to please share that concern. Did record starting at the beginning of the panel. So also a last call for any topics for future virtual get-togethers like we've done. That's something that if you don't do it now, there's a info at acho.org that you can send any thoughts that you have.
Alice, I did have a quick thought to add. First off, thank you to all the panelists today. And one thing I was kind of thinking of is it might be good to maybe have a check-in, at the end of the summer to kind of maybe see where things are at with some of the organizations that presented today, especially because it's such a fluid situation, as we kind of heard. But that was kind of one thought that occurred today was just, almost like in a movie, when the 6 months later appears at the screen, just to kind of see where these organizations are at and how we might be able to further support them.
Okay, good idea.
Ryan, my boss, I keep asking her so many questions, and finally yesterday she said, I don't know much, but I do know that at least we'll have a plan for camps by September. Okay, perfect. So there's that 6-month flash forward for you.
That's awesome. I like that. That's yep. Yeah, I would love to get back together though, just to piggyback off that. I would be more than happy to participate or just attend another session and talk about where we landed and how that experience was for us. And then I know I keep saying this, but also what we're thinking about for field trips, because I think that's going to be a bigger topic as fall rolls around and we have a better idea about what schools are doing and how we're able to support teachers.
Okay. So just to remind you to tell your colleagues, if it's not you, because I know some of you do multiple hats. You do education, but you do other things too. Tomorrow, the Washington State Historical Society has their Coven Collection webinar. I believe that's at 10 or 11 in the morning. Can't remember the time. I just know it's when I have another meeting. So that's why I know it's at either 10 or 11. So that might be something of interest to your organization. So share the word if it's not you. And certainly feel free to go to the ACHO website, the For Culture website, the Washington State Historical website. All of them try to keep putting up resources as they get learned about. So they all have a place on their website to go for resources. And as we've said over and over again today, it's constantly changing. So, if you looked 2 weeks ago, there are probably some new resources up there. So I think this is great. I'm glad that we have the opportunity to get together. If anyone has anything else to say, otherwise we will conclude. Okay, well, thanks, Erin, very much for putting this together and for all of the participants, Natalie and Rich and Ellie and Allison. It was great for you to prepare and to share with us. And everybody take care, stay safe, and
yes.
We look forward to seeing you again.